So this is finding and using paradigms part 2. In the last video, we were looking at this example of the Walmart improving its public image by using a local public garden, and we mentioned some of the theoretical terms that they found. None of these were really theories, but they were terms that they could define and use to help explain what was happening in the empirical models. This is an additional example that's also available on that document in resources, and it gives an overview of an elementary school in Edison, and the students' project was trying to convince them to add Hindi to its foreign language curriculum, but not at a high school level, to add it at the elementary school level. And the theoretical framework that they used focused on two parts. One was the argument for early language acquisition, the research behind why it's easier and eventually more effective to teach a language to a student when they're young as opposed to when they're older. And then secondly, she did some research on different methods of teaching foreign language. And she found there are 3 real theories about teaching foreign language to elementary schools. And she looked at the different research showing the pros and cons of each one, and eventually ended up writing an argument for why the FLES method is preferred for her particular group. And then, of course, she found some empirical models that built that up. For example, she had lots of models throughout the Northeast that had absolutely nothing to do with teaching Hindi, but there were nonetheless effective empirical models because they illustrated successful use of the FLES method and helped her in her argument that that method was better than the other theoretical options. And then secondly, she looked at the example of Hindi USA. Now that's a private group that's teaching Hindi, and their models say nothing about whether they're using the immersion, flex, and FLES. But once she had those terms and concepts kind of under her belt, she could then analyze their curriculum and illustrate how, even though they weren't explicitly using the FLES method, that indeed when you analyze their particular approach, it was most consistent with the FLES method as opposed to any other ones. So then once she had made that link, she was able to show the success that Hindi USA had had and use that as further evidence of the FLES method. So jumping to an essay that you see in a little bit different form, it's in your book on Designs for Working by Malcolm Gladwell. This is an essay that I assigned you to read because of how well it uses and illustrates the concept of paradigm. And you'll note from reading this that what Malcolm Gladwell does is show us how a theory of urban space that was used in the 60s by Jane Jacobs to talk about the East Village and to kind of, it was used in urban planning, has now been borrowed to talk about workplace design. And you can see the kind of key argument right here comes right here, right? On the 40th anniversary of its publication, Death and Life has been reborn as a primer on workplace design. The parallels between neighborhoods and offices are striking. And so the rest of the paper really builds on that claim about the parallels between neighborhoods and offices, and borrows the theoretical paradigm that was used in the 60s as an argument for revitalization of urban areas all over the United States, was used then to change the way that people are thinking about setting up workplace design. And if you've read this, you know some of the examples that Gladwell has gathered of how we can redesign a workplace to model it more on the concept of a city than on our traditional, workplace. And so that's Gladwell's essay is an excellent example both of theoretical paradigm and then of giving us empirical examples of illustrations that help us see how that theoretical model has been used in action. And it's the combination of those two things, the theoretical and the empirical, that make for a really persuasive argument in your literature review. There's one more video on finding and using paradigms, and that's going to look at the examples of childhood obesity and saving black male adolescents from the student writing samples and resources. Please read those first before watching the final video.